You're listening to episode 149 of the D6 podcast.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 podcast. Here's your hosts, Ron Hunter and Jeremy Lee.
This is the family ministry podcast that helps you connect the church and home. Hey, Ron, it's springtime.
It is.
And one of my favorite parts of springtime, especially this time of year, is the NCAA March Madness basketball tournament is coming up.
Do you do brackets?
I
How many sets of brackets do you fill out?
So many brackets. And this year, I don't. This isn't ESPN, so
yes.
But this year in particular,
yeah.
College. First of all, do you watch? I don't even know. Do you watch college basketball? You don't, do you?
I do this time of the year, and that's the only time of the year I do.
So then, let me help you. If you haven't been watching, I'm going to bring you up to speed. There's this guy named Zion Williamson on the Duke team. He is 280 pounds, and he can jump above the rim. He is a physical freak, and he, along with R.J. Barrett and Cam Reddish, I'm really getting into it here. But anyway,
yes,
the point is,
I wish you could see his face over here just describing all this.
They're the top three freshmen in all of high school. They went to one school to make a super team.
Wow.
They're in it, but then, you know, we're from Tennessee, and the Tennessee Vols, for most of the season have been they've been ranked number one. They have been one of the best teams. So there is a collision coming, in my opinion, between Duke and Tennessee, and I cannot wait for it. And I just in general love. I don't work. Don't try to call me on the first few days of the tournament. I don't work.
You don't listen. Yeah.
I sit and I watch constantly. It's very.
How many TVs do you have going at this point?
Well, I usually find a restaurant or something that has all the TVs going. So there's like 27, all of them. And I just sit there all day with a group of buddies.
And you take care of your server really well.
Yes, and I eat way too much food. And I can't be the only one. There's got to be people listening here. And what happened?
My son does the same thing. And because he's been in the service business, I always ask him, I said, he said, oh yeah. He said, I always sit with a group of guys we agree to take. You want to be the server at my son's table when that happens.
And usually it's the folks that are listening to this podcast that are going to their pastor and they're like, hey, can we turn the games on the TV during the day at the church?
Oh, yes. Absolutely. Start listening.
You know, if you've got to work, might as well watch while you're working.
So how many times have you made it pretty well in your brackets close to the end where you're competitive with your group? And how big is your group? Because
I semi-regularly win.
Do you really?
Ron, I'm no joke. I am no joke.
Well, see, I'm the guy that you want in your group to help you look good. My bracket is so busted so quickly, it's not funny.
All right, that's enough basketball talk.
Okay.
I just had to have a little fun today. But speaking of fun, we are going to be with Sissy Goff today. And we've talked about Sissy. She's an all-star. Like at the D6 conference, she was a part of a panel we did. That was, and she's always impressed us, but that was super impressive.
Yes, she is the one that if I had a group of speakers and I were putting speakers' names on brackets, I would take her all the way out.
There we go.
How about that? How about that?
Hey, we should do that. We should have a D6 speaker bracket.
We just can't publicize that one because then we'd make people mad.
Absolutely.
But no, she is a breakout.
Well, you've already made them mad.
Yes.
You said Sissy would win, so
I did, didn't I? I took it. She'd go to the finals. So
all right. Well,
incredible. So our listeners are going to love the depth and perception that she has. She just can take a situation and see what's behind it. We see for what's on the surface. She sees what's behind it. And I think that's what makes her so good at what she does.
And her partner, David Thomas, that we heard last week, they just make kind of an amazing team. And and you'll hear us talk about this book called Are You on Track? And I remember when they first talked to me about it, it's like when you take your kid to the pediatrician and they let you know whether or not they're physically making
and what
their milestones.
percentile they're in. Yes,
nobody ever does that really for the heart and for the soul.
No, that's right.
And that's what they've done. They've said, hey, here's some ways to know that your child is developing spiritually and emotionally.
That's right.
How cool is that? So she's going to be talking about that from the perspective of a daughter.
And then talk about measurements. Mark Holmen's going to come right back behind, and he has developed an instrument to measure the health of a church, and he's going to unpack that in a way to help you understand not just the assessment side, but how you can get there as well from a church side. So Sissy Goff, from your daughters being on track to Mark Holmen, your church being on track.
So I'm going to take a break from filling out my bracket for a second, and we're going to enjoy these interviews. After the break, we'll be hearing from Sissy Goff.
Are you looking for the right conference to attend this year? The D6 Conference is a family ministry conference designed for your entire ministry team. Come hear from over 30 speakers and network with churches that share your passion for reaching families. Family ministry isn't just another program. It's one of the most important things your church can do to make a difference in your city. At the D6 Conference, you'll be inspired and equipped to take your family ministry to the next level. To learn more about the D6 Conference, just go to d6conference.com.
I am thrilled to bring my friend, Sissy Goff, to you guys today. She is pretty much, I think by now we can call you an expert. I know you're going to be humble and say, I don't know. But I learned yesterday you're an expert Diana Ross fan.
I love Diana Ross. Yes, I saw her in Las Vegas not too long ago.
What was that like?
I think she changed clothes 7 times in an hour and a half. She was amazing. She really defines diva in this whole way that nobody else does. She was phenomenal.
Incredible. Yeah, I peeped in on the live video yesterday and saw the carpool karaoke with Diana Ross was your favorite guest.
Yes, David was a little more mellow.
Yeah,
James Taylor,
Carpenter.
Yeah.
That's so David. I'll have to mess with him.
You will have to, yeah.
Listen, if you haven't heard or read anything from Sissy, this is going to be a treat for you. She spends most of her days, she says, talking with girls and their families with the help of her pet therapist, Lucy. How's Lucy doing?
She's doing great.
She
mad at me because I'm not with her.
She works as the director of child and adolescent counseling at Daystar Counseling Ministries in Nashville, Tennessee, with a master's degree from Vanderbilt University, anchor down.
Yes.
Sissy speaks to parents and children's ministers across the country. She's the author of 9 books, including her newest, which we're going to be talking about today, Are My Kids on Track? And then also Raising Girls, which we've talked about in the past. Great book.
Thanks.
All right, so our theme today is going to be, I love this interview because it's going to be just straightforward. How do we know that our daughter is on track? So you have written this book, Are My Kids on Track? I think the idea of it might be one of my favorites. And this isn't just flattery, like it's so smart. Based kind of out of what we get when we go to the pediatrician visits, right?
Right, exactly. Yes, that they are chronicling, especially in those early stages, all of the things that kids are supposed to be doing at certain milestones. When we talk about physical milestones, we talk about cognitive milestones. I mean, they can track that a child is reading at a 5th grade, 3rd month level, but nobody's talking about the emotional and social and spiritual milestones. And at this point, David and Melissa and I, who all wrote the book together, have all been counseling. I forgot what our number is. I think we really stopped saying our real number. We stopped at 75 years of combined counseling experience because we just started sounding old. But we've been counseling a lot of years, and we believe that kids have gotten off track in a way that they've never been before. Really, in the last 3 to 5 years, I think we've become more concerned than ever, which is why we wrote this book. And,
so what a great book. I love books that you can read for years, almost like a reference book, right? Because you can check and see how is my kid doing along the way. So let's, if we can, just steal a little bit of some tips from you.
Yes.
If I have a daughter and she is 5 years old, what does on track look like emotionally and spiritually for a 5-year-old?
Well, and let me say at the outset, there's a lot of grace for the track. I mean, kids, it just takes a lot of practice. We talk about it's like developing a muscle. And so they've got to learn to do these things. And the one that we feel like emotionally is most important for girls in that window is really developing an emotional vocabulary. And we at Daystar, we do individual counseling, we do group counseling. We see parents that their kids don't necessarily need counseling. They're just coming in, probably it's part of where that title came from, saying, hey, are we on the right track? And it's fascinating to sit with parents of 5-year-old girls, and the emotion they talk about the most coming from those girls is anger. But as I sit with the parents and we talk more about it, it turns out that they have a hard time with the seams in their shirts or the seams in their socks, or they have a really hard time with transitions, and we can start to talk about maybe they have some issues with sensory, or maybe they have a little bit of anxiety underneath, but at that age they don't know how to talk about their feelings. And so it shoots out as anger, like psychologists say anger is a secondary emotion, and like it is for us. If I'm not processing it, it's going to come out as anger too. And so for us to help girls find their way to appropriate words to describe their emotions in that stage is really important, and feels like it just benefits them for the long haul. I mean, how much better would our adult relationships be if we had known how to describe our feelings well as young children?
Yeah, and let's dive in just a little bit more to the anger as a secondary emotion. There might be some adults listening to that who might want some more explanation. It could be very freeing. I know it was very freeing for me when my counselor taught me that sadness is often very connected. Sometimes when I'm angry, I'm really sad.
Yes.
And that's a nice thing to understand.
Yes, absolutely. And it can be anything, but I think anger makes us feel more control often, which is why, not that it's a conscious decision to control your feelings, but you don't feel like it's appropriate. And we so often label certain feelings as bad and certain feelings as good. And some of the ones that we feel are bad include sadness or fear. And so we shove them down. And I had a mom say to me one time about her daughter that her daughter was not wanting to talk about her feelings. And so she pulled her aside and she said, here's the deal. If you don't process your feelings are going to process you.
Nice.
Yeah, and that's when it comes out as anger. And we all know that feeling. We've all done that before.
Oh, I need to remember that. Process feelings, or they'll process you. That's great. That's a T-shirt. That's your next fundraiser T-shirt.
Process your feelings.
So what about a 10-year-old girl? What does it look like for her to be on track?
So as we move a little older, I would say David will probably talk about how boys can get stuck in not learning to name their feelings. I think girls can get stuck in not being able to control their feelings or regulate their feelings. We think about a 1 to 10 scale emotionally, and there are so many girls who live at 10. I mean, we teach a parenting seminar on this content, and in it I show, did you see Inside Out?
Yes.
Okay, sorrow. Yes. Remember that scene where she flings herself on the ground and says, it feels good not to walk, and will you carry? I mean, the joy ends up dragging her through the halls, which I always say, I've never seen anything that feels like counseling girls. Like that movie nails it. And there's a sense of, I'm just going to let myself go. And I think kids, again, we want them to name it first because it helps with the processing, but they have got to learn to dial it down. We know life really happens in a 2 to 7 on a 1 to 10 scale, and they don't know how to do that so often. And so teaching them some practical tools to help bring it back. In every chapter of our book, we have just bullets of practical ways to help them learn these things. But that we call it perspective, and that would be the thing, I think, for 10-year-old girls that feels crucial because, again, all of these things get scarier the older they get if they haven't learned them.
Yeah, it's a multiplying effect.
Right,
yeah. Right. Nice, okay. So what about 14? Now we're entering puberty, middle school, that whole stage. 14, what does that look like?
14, I would say we want them to be learning more empathy because it's not going to come as naturally. You've read Raising Girls, and we talk about that being the narcissistic years in a girl's life.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just thinking about themselves perpetually, and some of that's really normal. Boys do too, that they move through this period where they're trying to become their own people, and so that takes a lot of brain power, and so they're just thinking about themselves a lot. And so to have them push past that and reach out to somebody else is not only great for them relationally, but it also helps build a lot of confidence. I mean, statistically, there's so many studies that show that kids giving of themselves is a great confidence elevator.
That's good. Okay, so let's talk about a 17-year-old girl, a whole nother level of issues there.
Yes. So we could talk at length about anxiety, but one of the antidotes we feel like in counseling to anxiety is resourcefulness. And that's the thing I hear most girls saying that have anxiety that they don't know how to do. I don't know what to do. Nothing helps. Nothing makes a difference. I can't do anything. There's this sense of kind of throwing up their hands because they believe they're powerless. And so to help kids move their emotion towards resourcefulness feels so important in those times. And so we talk a lot about the magic formula of empathy and questions. That sounds really tough. What do you want to do about it? What do you think is going to help? What do you believe you can do that's going to make a difference? Because even if they don't know, simply asking the question implies that we believe they do know. They can figure it out. And so that's what we want to keep communicating to them over and over and over.
Okay, so we've kind of given a really good snapshot. They need to get the book for the more detail, right? But we've given a great snapshot of what on track looks like in a couple of different stages of a girl's life. Now, I think inevitably we have to ask ourselves, what do we do if somebody's listening to you and goes, oh my goodness, my daughter is not, just with the little bit that I've heard, my daughter's not on track. How do we handle that? What do we do?
So that's where the practical stuff, I think, comes in. Because, and to be honest, I mean, you know how this goes, but when you're naming a book, unless you're Beth Moore, sometimes you don't get to pick the title. And we had such a hard time with the title of this book.
Really?
Yeah, and conceptually we liked it, but it sounds very judgmental. It sounds very like there is this specific, at 7, a child should have mastery of this. And that is not the way we feel at all. There's so much grace for it. And so kids are going to be moving forward all throughout their development and all of the milestones. And like that muscle, we just want to be practicing and layering in activities, conversation that are going to help build up all of these ideas in them. And we have, I forgot to say this, we have a podcast based on the book that each episode is a different milestone, and they're like 20 to 25 minutes. It was really done so that people could do it in a small group. And so we have a really dear friend who was the host, and she wanted to do it as a discussion. So you could ride a small group, listen to the podcast. You don't even have to read the book. Ride a small group, listen to the podcast. Then we have downloadable discussion questions on our website. Talk about the questions. And then that way you can practice it on the weeks in between. And so I think just practice feels crucial in terms of them developing these muscles.
Well, what's the name of that podcast?
Are My Kids on Track?
There we go. Okay.
So
Are My
creative.
Kids on Track podcast. I love it. Okay, so I'm going to thank you for all that, by the way. I want to transition a little bit, make sure people know you guys have a great blog, raisingboysandgirls.com or .com?
.com. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, raisingboysandgirls.com. And one of my favorite features on there, I think you are involved with a lot, is Technology Tuesdays.
Yes.
Where you kind of address the technology beast that it's becoming. And I do say beast because before I get into this really cool article that I came across, I want to make sure everybody knows about. I just need some counseling myself because I've sat here now, and the perspective I get at D6 is awesome, right? I get to near 50 people come through here with all different kinds of views.
So much.
But I would say this. The most varying view of perspective is this technology issue. I've heard people say we should blow up the phones and all sit around in candlelight and sing Kumbaya. And then I've heard people say we should be leveraging technology to connect with our kids, and it's not. Man, please help me, because I feel, at least tell me where you are on this scale. I think I'm looking for balance because do we blame everything on it, or do we just act like it's no big deal? I don't think either one feels right to me.
Right.
So where's that middle? I need somebody to help me define the middle.
And I'm with you. I would land in the middle because I do, sitting with kids every day in counseling, I absolutely believe, particularly for girls, social media is contributing to anxiety. There's just no question. contributing to depression because I hear a story daily about, well, I looked at my phone and all my friends I saw them posting photos. I didn't know they were all together. Or now these snap maps, that's how you say it, show literally the little icon of each of their friends together on the map. And so, that sense of, I don't think I was invited to the birthday party. Now I know I wasn't invited to the birthday party. And at the same time, girls communicate via text, Instagram, and Snap. What's it called? Snapchat. It's too many snaps floating around. Yes, they communicate via those things. And so to some degree, I think if we don't let them do any of it, we're restricting them in a way that I think can hinder them socially, unfortunately. What I say, I teach a parenting class on technology, and I always say you don't want to be the first, you don't want to be the last, be the next to last, to let them have each thing, because if they have if you're the last on every front, then they're often going to be the ones who are sneaking it from somebody else, who are finding their way to it, who it makes look like the forbidden fruit. Plus the fact that my philosophy is, in all things, we want to teach kids responsibility while they're at home. Mm-hmm. And so if we don't let them do anything, and all of a sudden they're 18 and living on their own, and then they have access to everything, they won't have learned how to be responsible with it in the meantime. They're going to mess up. And so to gradually let out the ropes, and then when they blow it, as they will, we pull it back in. And we go back and forth, is my sense of what that looks like.
Yes. I knew you would help me, Sissy.
Well, I think there's so many great things now that are different apps, different protective measures that we can install to help regulate their time, to regulate what they're seeing, to watch what they're doing. And I think we watch hardcore in the beginning, and then again, we watch less and less as they get older and prove themselves responsible.
Again, more good wisdom. All right. Speaking of that, You set up yourself the next question perfectly, because you wrote an article on YouTube, which is something I know is, maybe I love this because it hits home for me. My boys are watching YouTube and obviously concerned. What I want to make sure that we've got that set up as well as we can to put those walls and barriers around. So this article, they can go to raisingboysandgirls.com and look under the Technology Tuesdays. It's called Safeguarding Your Kids on YouTube. So could you give some of the tips from that article, and then hopefully they'll go to your blog and look it up and get more. But just kind of introduce that to us so they can understand how valuable it is.
Yes, and honestly, we probably need to write another one in a week because we wrote this 6 months ago. And the hard thing about everything technology-wise, as we know, is it changes. As soon as you figure out how to safeguard them, there's something new, which is why we do this blog and why all of us need to be connected to resources that are updating regularly because it changes so fast. So what we said about YouTube, because it is, especially I think of elementary age kids, parents, that's what we hear questions about the most. So 6 big things. One is you want to enable a restrictive filter. And all these are settings you can put on. You want to disable recommended videos because those pop up, and then all of a sudden your child is seeing something that you didn't know they had any access to that you wouldn't want them to see at all. You can purchase an ad blocker on YouTube Red because the ads, as we know, can sometimes get a little scary. YouTube Kids has a lot of great restrictions built in for kids under the age of 12. That's really helpful. You can disable the search parameters or disable their ability to search, which again, on anything search is where they're going to get into trouble because I sit with kids, parents every day who they search something, some sexual term, and all kinds of things pop up. And then a great thing is you can also create playlists yourself of the videos that you've watched, that you trust, that you feel like there's not some spin-off. Because one of the things I hear a lot of kids talk about is fan fiction. And so they may start to watch. I mean, I had a girl recently talk about, she didn't talk about it, her mom talked about it first, that she loved Disney. And all of a sudden, one website led the way to the next, that led the way to the next, to where she ended up reading and writing about Disney characters doing all kinds of pornographic things on fan fiction. And so it's just a rabbit hole that anybody can go down, and we sure don't want the kids we love to end up going down the rabbit hole.
And thank you for people like you that help us know what switches to flip to kind of help with that. So definitely an article worth your time. So if you're a minister, children's or youth minister, that's an article and a blog that would be good to recommend to parents. They will probably love you for it. Okay, so I have a sneaking suspicion we're about to talk about anxiety, because what is the next big project you're working on? I want a little bit of a sneak peek.
It feels like such a big project. I have read, so at Daystar we have a summer camp, our version of a summer camp, and I'm the director. And so I was gone all summer, and I would have 3 days at home in between. And literally between when camp started and now, I have read 23 books on anxiety. So I feel so twitchy all the time, whatever I'm doing.
So anxious.
I know, I feel so anxious. But I know how to breathe. I know how to do all kinds of helpful things. So yes, I'm writing a book, 2 books right now. One for parents of girls on technology. I mean, not technology. It is in there for sure on anxiety. And then one for elementary school age girls about anxiety. And then potentially later we'll do one for middle school and high school. Because, I mean, even in the last 2 weeks, I did 14 assessments. So 14 first-time appointments coming to Daystar where I counsel. Every single one of them was anxiety related. Every one of them. And when we wrote Are My Kids on Track, the statistics were 1 in 8 children. Now, I think that was 3 years ago. Now it's 1 in 4. It's changing that fast.
Wow.
And so we've got to give kids some practical tools that can help them. And so that's what these books are born out of. I'm really excited about both of them. Twitchy, but excited.
I hope you guys have enjoyed this as much as I have. I always love having Sissy and David, her partner, on here. It's incredible. And thank you guys for what you do at Daystar. Thank you for the impact you've made on my family personally. Please go to raisingboysandgirls.com to learn more about their books. They have we didn't even get to really talk this time about Raising Girls, which is an incredible book if you have a daughter in your home, or parents who have daughters in your ministry, which I know you do, then therefore you want to grab that. But thank you so much, Sissy, for being with us.
Thank you. I always love it.
Since 2009, the D6 Conference has empowered thousands of church leaders to embrace family ministry and strengthen the connection between church and home. Reaching that many church leaders, think of how many homes and communities across the world have been impacted in the last 9 years. My family, like yours, is among them. As a team here at D6, we've had the privilege of being in Dallas, Louisville, and Greensboro, plus 5 other countries. So each year we prayerfully consider the best place to host this growing international gathering, and we have a big announcement to make. After thoughtful consideration and prayer, we are excited to announce the D6 Conference in 2019 will be hosted in beautiful Orlando, Florida. Did you hear me? Orlando, Florida. The entire team at D6 cannot imagine a more iconic city where you can see families of all ages come together, the very basis of generational discipleship. Imagine debriefing your discipleship strategy on Tom Sawyer Island in the heart of Magic Kingdom. Or take a day at Universal Studios to dream of what your church could do in family ministry. The conference will be hosted at the state-of-the-art Marriott World Center. You gotta check this place out. It's both beautiful and offers fun for your entire family ministry team. So come spend some time away from your daily routine in an affordable city and convention center designed for your family. The D6 Conference is the conversation, Orlando is the venue, but your team brings the chemistry. The D6 Conference always provides world-class learning, networking, and access to family ministry resources. And now we get to do that with you in a brand new way. We can't think of a better place to host the D6 Conference. So lock the dates in your calendar, and we'll see you and your team here in Orlando in 2019.
Okay, Jeremy, put away a bracket. You've already got them filled in. Yours is far better than mine. I've been copying off of you as much as I possibly can. It's time for us to go into Mark, but it's really important. We talked about all these incredible authors, incredible speakers. It's time to remind people once again, register. This is the last week going into that price break for the D6 conference. And this is the conference you bring your entire team to. And this year, because it's in Orlando, we suspect you'd want to bring your family. I suspect we'll have more spouses there than we've ever had before.
And the deadline for that is March 6th. So
that's right.
You better be listening in real time if you're going to take advantage of the good price break, because the price goes up tomorrow if you're listening right when this episode is released. So please take advantage of that. And even if you miss it, you still
get in. Yeah. Again, let me tell you who should come. Parents, grandparents, ministry leaders. 85% of our attendees are ministry leaders in some capacity, either paid or voluntary, or they might be bivocational. 55% are male, 45% are female. The number one attendee is children's ministry leaders. Number 2 is student pastors. Number 3 is lead pastors, then family ministry leaders. And that's only because they're growing in popularity right now. And then every other side, all the way down to executive pastor, worship pastor. This is the conference you bring your entire team to strategize.
In my world, I talk to ministers a lot. And one of my favorite questions is to say, how are you doing with parent ministry or with family ministry? And they don't know how to answer that question. And so that's why I'm excited about this interview. This is how we can figure out how we're doing, how we can measure it. So let's listen to Mark and learn from him.
Well, this is such a good time to meet and connect. We love D6 because we get to meet with so many leaders. And Mark, we've got to talk several times with Mark Holmen at faithandhome.com. And so we have some exciting news to talk about, which I can't wait to get to. But I want to just ask you, because you have such valuable perspective. And what I like to say is just a perspective of the whole movement of family ministry. You've been a part of this movement across the country for years now, and you've seen the ebbs and flow of it. And let's ask this: why do you think it's been so hard for us to really figure out, as children's pastors, student pastors, family ministers, senior pastors, why do we have such a hard time really figuring out what is working and why it's working? Because we all live in theory land, I think, so much, because we're so passionate about generational discipleship, and it's the right theory. We believe it, but we don't understand what is working and why it's working. So kind of unpack that for us, what you see. Why is it so hard for us?
Well, as a pastor in a church, most things we can evaluate pretty easily as to whether it's working or not. We can look at attendance, we can look at giving, we can look at response of people that respond and say yes to going to a retreat or committing to something that we're doing at the church or promoting at the church. When it comes to this whole movement of whether you call it Faith at Home, D6, family discipleship, whatever term you attach to it, it's tough because it requires us to look at something that's not happening at church and try to examine, how do we know what's really happening in homes? How do we know what moms and dads are really doing with their kids? And because it's not like we have lenses into the home. We don't have cameras there. We don't have a way to assess that very easily. And so sometimes I think this movement has struggled because we really don't know how to evaluate it, and we don't know how to know if we're getting anywhere, even when we do start implementing.
If you can't measure something, it's just like with giving. I mean, giving or attendance, those are easy things to measure and know, so is something gaining momentum or losing momentum? And therefore, when it's difficult to measure the impact of family ministry.
It was.
And it will be discouraging, and where that's one of the areas it can lose momentum. And what's really cool, we're going to spend most of our time talking about this, is that you have shifted Faith at Home to and leveraged the past few years to do some incredible research. And so why don't you kind of talk about that shift and what you've done and what's coming in November for leaders?
We hadn't talked about this, but I think it's important that you, maybe your listeners, know too. A part of this was where the genesis of it began. I was supposed to be speaking at a D6 conference. It was, 6th year in a row or something like that. But my mom was killed in a car accident just on her way. She was the Faith at Home champion in my home, and a semi went through a stop sign, and all of a sudden I'm parentless. And she was and I came, and D6 was very generous and gracious and just said, you don't need to speak this year. And but I still came. And I remember that year I was broken, the wind were out of my sails, but I just listened. I just went to workshops and sat in the back, which normally when you're speaking, you never have time to do. And through that listening time, what I heard over and over at a lot of these different workshops was that question of, where do we begin? How do we know where our people are really at? And then the other was, how do we know if we're getting anywhere?
Yeah.
And no one had a good answer for it. I know if I would have been leading a workshop, I wouldn't have had a good answer for it, because our ministry at that point was a broadcast ministry. We just helped churches get started and fired them up to want to do it, but then we left and went to the next place. And so afterwards, that started a journey where we really decided to change as a ministry and say, somebody's got to go after that. And yes, there is not. I talked to George Barna, who's a friend, and he said there is no assessment tool for the home. And what's happening in the home, to really give a good picture. And he said it won't be easy to develop. Well, it took us 4 years of painstaking work trying to develop a survey for the home that truly examines. And so we developed what's called the Faith Life Service. Or survey. You can call it faithlife.me is where you find it at. And I tell you what it looks at is churches can have their people take this survey. And when they're done, and what I love is, as a senior pastor, you're always nervous to have people take a survey, because it's like, is that going to beat me up?
Exactly.
How are they going to use that against me? This survey has nothing to do with the pastor's preaching, nothing to do with anything that's happening at church. It's all about what's happening in the homes. And it looks at people's attitudes. Do they think they should be praying in home, reading the Bible in the home? Should they be engaging in faith talk in the home, worship? Should they? Where's their attitude at? Because that's the first step. Is, do we have attitudinal problem? And do they think it's not important, or do they think it is important? Then the second thing it looks at is their behaviors. Are they doing it? Are they praying in home? Are they praying in home personally? Are they praying with their spouse? Are they praying with their kids? Are they reading the Bible? Are they involved in worship in the home? Global missions, all these across 7 different areas that we examine of faith at home areas. So we look at their behaviors, and then the final thing then we examine is, where do they desire help? So we call it the ABDs, the attitudes, behaviors, and then the desires. Yeah. Do you desire help praying? Do you desire help reading the Bible? Do you desire help reading the Bible with your kids, with your spouse? And I tell you what, the findings are just, and so we have a new book that comes out November 1st that's called Faith at Home Revealed. And it's going to finally showcase what's happening in homes. And the first book is just about church-going parents.
Yes.
We're going to have one coming out in 2019 that's about men versus women. What's the difference there? But this first one, we just wanted to examine what's happening in the homes of church-going parents.
And the forward, written by
George Barna.
Come on,
I know.
That's such a compliment.
I'll never
George
forget.
Would not.
He doesn't write forwards
if he didn't value the research.
Yeah, and he wrote the foreword for my very first book. I love how God works. Brings me out to Ventura to be a senior pastor there. Little did I know that George Barna lives in Ventura, and he came to our church every so often. Then he fell in love with faith at home, and he was the one that came to me and said, "Mark, you have to write a book." And then he went to Gospel Light at the time and he was the one that said, "I'm writing a foreword for Mark's book." And I'm like, I'm not even a writer. I don't know how to do that.
That's unbelievable.
So we consider him a real friend. He believes in this overall movement. Don't get me wrong, it's not just about us.
Absolutely.
But he was very encouraging to us to really develop a survey for the home. And so, it really helps churches, because I think one of the starting points, struggles for churches, is, where do we start? Well, now we can show churches, and I'm telling you, I made mistakes as I look back. I was telling all the churches to start at the same place. Now that I've got this tool, an instrument, I'm like, I shouldn't have been doing that.
Absolutely, because it's different. I love that you said, do we have an attitude problem? Because I think so many times we don't have the diagnostic tool to figure out if we have an attitude problem. It doesn't matter what we implement.
Correct.
If they don't have the insight to go, the desire to want it.
Correct.
It won't work. Now, you've had a couple churches kind of start moving through this process, I'm sure. What are some of the findings that you found? Let's give them a little bonus sneak peek into just a little bit of some of the things you learned and changes churches made.
Well, every church, when we get done our recommendations, because we give them a 2-hour kind of Skype-inar and a huge report, but we always point out what we call the golden triangle. Every church has different ones, different golden triangles. And what is that? A golden triangle is where you have a good attitude, so the person thinks it's important, but a horrible behavior, meaning they're not doing it, but a high desire for help. When you have that, then we say start there. That's your low-hanging fruit.
Yep.
So, for example, when my church went through it, what we found right away was our couples were screaming for help. They had a great attitude that they should be praying together as a couple, but they have a horrible behavior in doing it as a couple. They were doing it with their kids, and they were doing it personally. Prayer in the home was happening there, but it was not happening as a couple, and they had a high desire for help. So guess what we put together? We put together a prayer campaign for couples, a 40-day prayer campaign for couples, and we used some great resources that we stole from here at D6 of people that have really good stuff on that. And so then we just promoted it, and oh my goodness, it just went over, and we had testimonies afterwards. That's the fun that we have with churches, is we're able to show them, hey, this might be where you want to start, or some areas you want to address first. Because if you can help a church get a home run early, then it gives them more excitement to want to keep moving on with it and have more after that. So that's a little glimpse of kind of what we do.
That's so good. The book, what an advantage to give people a resource and evaluation tool. And I think you're right, and I want to end our time with that thought. I think when we're implementing more family ministry ideas and efforts in our churches, low-hanging fruit, quick momentum is important.
But let me give you one other thing. Don't forget that, because now we have churches that are taking this survey again after 3 years of implementing. The other problem that a lot of churches have is, how do we know if we're getting anywhere?
Yes.
Now we're able to show them, and Buffalo Covenant Church was one of our first that took it a second time. You should see the results. They've been implementing for 3 years, faith at home strategies, using D6, using a lot of the tools that have come out of this conference. You should see 10% changes here, 20% changes in this area, 15% changes in this area. And after they did the survey a second time, they walked away from that more excited to want to keep going. And kind of refired them up and make adjustments.
Because what happens when a church moves toward family discipleship, moves through generational discipleship, then what happens in year 5 is going to look completely different. And it's an ever-moving target, because we never arrive.
Correct.
We've always got families at the beginning stage, and we've always got families further along.
Correct.
Mark, this is going to be incredible. I want to tell you, because we've connected over the years, thank you for your investment in the church, and thank you for fighting for this. This is going to be a great tool. Tell everybody this is so important, how they can get in touch with you and how they can find out more information about the upcoming book.
For this, just go to faithathomerevealed.com. It'll give you all the information about the book. And then if you're interested in a survey, that's faithlife.me. And so those are the 2 tools that we have now to really help churches get started well. Then we provide coaching to help them develop a strategy that will work for the customized strategy that will work for them. And then we want to help you reassess every 3 years so that you can keep this thing going. It's going to take a long time for us to reestablish that home as the primary place and parents as primary, but we can do it.
Absolutely. And it just takes hard work, but it takes putting the work in the right place. So thanks for helping us figure out where to begin, where to start. This is going to be great. Thanks for being with us today.
No worries, brother. Thank you.
Awesome.
Our thanks go to Mark Holmen. I just continually, again, he is a repeat guest, a friend of D6 and of our podcast. So thank you so much for
and thank you, Michael Bain, for bringing that to light with us, for interviewing Mark on
Always
that.
love my man.
Yeah,
Michael,
absolutely.
Shout out Michael Bain, who also fills out a great bracket.
I'll bet he does.
And is a huge fan of Tennessee as well. So on behalf of Michael Bain, go Vols. Should I sing Rocky Top?
No, let's not.
All right, so next week. And next week we have a living legend.
We do indeed.
John Trent.
Yes. He's without a doubt maybe America's counselor.
Yeah.
Is that not a good way to describe him?
Yes. And he just kind of just makes you feel good when you talk to him.
He does. He does. I would love to read a book by John Trent of the who's who of people he counseled. And that's something we can never know. But I know from behind the scenes, this guy has tackled some of the most prominent leaders in America and in Christianity from a counseling standpoint. Now, get this. He gets a chance to go around and speak to military leaders. We're talking special forces. We're talking the commanders who are being trained to be the generals and the colonels. And I mean, he's training them from that angle of Christian psychology, that aspect. This guy's got a resume that just won't stop, and we get a chance to hear from him.
And our second guest is Olivia Bruner. If you're looking for a strategy on how to kind of unveil family ministry in your church, Olivia's going to talk to us and show us just great. She's just a strategic thinker, and she's going to be sharing that with us as well. Hey, guys, thanks for being with us. At this point, if you've lasted all the way through, that means you have given us a great gift of your time, and we don't take that for granted. We hope you'll join us next week, and we also hope you have a great week of ministry.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com.